If you are a teacher, parent, administrator, student, and/or anyone who loves reconnecting children with nature, and you want to figure out how to cultivate learning gardens and nature-based curriculum, then this is the podcast, the Outdoor Classrooms podcast. My name is Victoria Hackett. I am the founder of Outdoor-Classrooms.com and the Secret Gardens Nature Classes. I love witnessing the magic that happens when children are playfully learning outdoors. Observing the return of wonder and curiosity when children are interacting with nature is pure magic. This is the podcast that is going to help you capture children's interest and give you not only inspiration, but some real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to use the outdoor space, your outdoor space, as a teaching tool, so you can enlighten the playful learning experience for young children. Welcome to our Outdoor Classrooms community. Hey there, it's Victoria. We are going to dive into this episode in 1 second because it's so good. But before we do, I just want to ask you, did you know that I have an Outdoor Classrooms membership? Because it's the one thing that I am so excited about right now. It's called The Circle. This is a group of such amazing women and a few men, and I created it because it's what educators need. We need to surround ourselves with people who help us stay true to our identity as educators, who support the outdoor classroom movement, and who elevate our children's spirits, because we are the 5 people we spend the most time with. To solve our outdoor classrooms problems, we need to be with the people we can completely be ourselves with. Not only do we need to raise ourselves as educators, but we also don't need to be flawless parents and educators or take ourselves too seriously. That is the Circle membership. This is the space where you will feel so loved and so seen, if that is what you are looking for in your life and in your teaching practice. Just by being in this group, you will have the impression that you are developing into the educator and the person that you truly are. Every single week, there is something to tap into. Live Zoom sessions with me that are seasonal masterclasses, sessions with me that are Q&A and round tables. You are also going to have access to the Outdoor Classroom Tour and Talks from all over the world. We also have a book club in our community. Also, it's month to month, so you are going to want to check it out. So it's just a monthly commitment. I think you'll soon realize that this is something you've been looking for a long time. So if you want to check it out, go to www.outdoor-classrooms.com/circle-membership and you can join us. You're in for a treat today because we had an amazing event with Angela Hanscom, the author of Balanced and Barefoot, and we read the book in the Circle community, and in that community, we said would really like to open this up to the parents and the families of all the communities that we're serving. So what we decided to do was have a live Q&A session with Angela Hanscom herself. And I'm so grateful that she agreed to do this with us. And if you do not know her, she is a pediatric occupational therapist and founder of TimberNook, which is an award-winning developmental and nature-based program that has gained international popularity. She is the author of Balanced and Barefoot, How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children. Hanscom also is a frequent contributor of the Washington Post, and in 2019 won the Small Business of the Year award for the State of New Hampshire. She also has an incredible keynote, The Decline of Outdoor Play and the Rise of Sensory Issues. She also has a TED Talk, so she's just a wealth of knowledge. And this episode is the Q&A session that we've had with her. So I asked her a lot of questions, and you will also hear questions from our audience. So without further ado, Angela Hanscom. Welcome, welcome everybody to our live Q&A with Angela Hanscom, the author of Balanced and Barefoot, who is also the founder of TimberNook. So we are absolutely thrilled that you are here. We have been enjoying reading your book or listening to your book in our circle community, and we've already had some incredible discussions. First, I want to thank you for your time in joining us and answering some of our questions that we have from this journey that we've been on. So my first question is, we had someone ask, can you tell us a little bit more about TimberNook and what inspired you to write Balanced and Barefoot?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so it really was, I guess one of the most unique things about this is that TimberNook was not really an idea that I came up with. It was kind of like a series of events that happened in my life that got me on this path. So I'm an occupational therapist, and traditionally we work indoors, actually. We work in sensory clinics or in hospitals or in schools. And so it's not traditional for an OT to be out in the woods with giant mud puddles and, working with children. So really what started all of this was just paying attention to what was happening around me, and things kind of escalated quickly. I remember being in a sensory clinic and having kids that didn't like wind in their face come in for treatment. And I was like, how do I do that inside? Like, do I get a fan? It's funny because we'll bring in a little box of sand and call that sensory indoors. And we bring our swings inside to treat these neurological issues that we're seeing. And so I was just paying attention to that. And then when I had my second daughter, so my daughters are now 19, 16 years old, and then I have a son who's 8. But when my second daughter was born, when they were really little, that's actually when it all started, because I was going to stay home and my plan was not to work actually and just enjoy their childhood. Ironically, I did not want to be a manager of anything. I just wanted, my goal in life was just to be an occupational therapist, stay home as long as possible, and then go back. But obviously there was other plans in store for me. So I, joined a mom's group because that was kind of the thing to do at the time. But people started asking me like really interesting questions, like, why is my daughter spinning in circles all the time? Or, why is my child having trouble paying attention in preschool? And I'm like, these are interesting questions. And then my own daughter went to kindergarten, my oldest, who just graduated high school. And kindergarten was starting to shift from a morning program to all-day school. And I remember the teacher looking at us and saying, this is not kindergarten like you remember growing up. She's like, it's going to be more like first grade. And she said, we don't have time to teach your kids how to cut with scissors. So she said, my husband's going to pre-cut everything at nighttime, so you don't have to worry about that. And then she said 5 minutes for snack, but if that gets in the way of curriculum, it's going to be a working snack. And then she said, we don't have time to help your children tie their shoes. And then finally she said, recess is 15 minutes. And she goes, but when it snows, so we live in New Hampshire, and there's snow a good majority of the school year. She said, we're going to bring them indoors and have an indoor recess. And so this whole theme of no time for developmental skills kept popping up. And I was like, as an occupational therapist that works in developmental skills, I was like, this isn't right. And so I ended up homeschooling, and I learned about different educational philosophies. Long story short, it was around that time where I started noticing there was not a lot of kids outside playing. And I'm like, where are they? Like, we live on 12 acres of woodland and we have 50 acres of conservation surrounding us. But sometimes I'll take a shortcut through the neighborhood to get to our property. And there's tons of children about the same age as my kids that growing up lived there, and they were never outside. And so I was like, why are they not, biking to each other's houses like I grew up, in the early 80s? And so that, just paying attention. And then what happened was I decided to run a program outdoors. And I really thought I was going to run nature classes until I ran my first one. And then I had a parent come up to me with their son in hand and ask me why the leaves change color. And I was like, oh, I think it has something to do with a pigment in the leaf. Trying to remember from my science classes from high school. But it really helped me reflect on my background. And, I'm not a teacher. I'm not an environmentalist or naturalist. And really at the time, those were the professionals running nature programming. And I kept thinking, what does an occupational therapist have anything to do with nature programs? And what I realized over the years is that the occupation of a child, the most important occupation of a child, is play. And outdoor play is a really meaningful occupation that's really at risk in ways that we never imagined. And I mean, COVID just made it 10 times worse, right? Or unveiled it at least. And so the whole mission behind TimberNook and the reason why it probably started was because it's really about restoring the occupation of outdoor play, but making it as authentic as possible. And that's why it's so therapeutic. So we have people that come and train here to bring TimberNook to different locations, and because it's just a licensed program that you receive ongoing training and licensing for. And basically, like, we have a lot of occupational therapists. So I would say half are occupational therapists and the half are from the field of education. Or they might be a really concerned parent that has a passion to do this, does not have to be an occupational therapist, because really we're training them to bring this authentic occupation into the schools and into their communities to create change. And so basically that what I realize is, when therapists come and train, often they'll say that a week of TimberNook is like 6 months of therapy. And they're like, why is that? And so it's because it's real life. There's a mixture of ages out there. We have kids from 4 years old all the way to 12. Like today, we had a field trip from kids were 4 to like 11 or 12 out there, having play experiences. And it's very much like they're given inspiration to play. So, for instance, we might read them a story, like Three Little Pigs. And then there might be real bales of hay out there, big sticks, and bricks. There might be wolf masks and pulleys and ropes of different sizes. And then we basically give them the opportunity to create their own Three Little Pig homes. But the environment is kind of staged ahead of time so that it's really inspiration, because a lot of kids, when they come out to a program, they don't have a lot of practice playing. And so the environment is really key in TimberNook so the adults can reduce their adult presence out there and get out of the way. And we can talk about that more later, but that's basically how TimberNook started. And then what happened is I was just doing it for a summer. I was actually just going to do the program for one summer from my own community, and I ran 3 weeks of summer camp because, my friend said, I think you're going to find people more likely to drop their children off. So TimberNook actually started as a summer camp, and I took UNH occupational therapy students as volunteers because I thought, what a cool mentorship for these students to see nature for its therapeutic value. And then after 3 weeks of camp, it was really successful, but it was so much work. Typically, we work one-on-one with a child or a small group of children. So running an entire group was like, I don't know, it was like putting on a birthday party every day. So after the 3 weeks, I'm like, I'm never doing that again. I'm like, that was so much work. But what happened was I had this gut feeling like, let's see what happens. So those 4 OT students that helped me that first summer went back to university, and I had 14 volunteers for the next year. And
Wow.
I had 2 teachers reach out and ask if they could help. And one of the teachers, her idea was to do Three Little Pigs and stories out in nature. But she wanted to do it at picnic tables and to like recreate it at picnic tables. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool to have real bricks out there and real bales of hay? And so they're engaging the muscles and senses and living and breathing the play experience. And so that first year, I was very much doing adult-directed activities. They were really good ideas, but I was pretty much leading them. And then it shifted to having a play experience where they might not bring home those Three Little Pig homes, but they're having a play experience that's designed to create change in the child. And so every year after that, I basically would say I'm do it one more summer. And what happened is 3 years into it, the camps were filling up really quick. So at 9 o'clock, I released 4 weeks of summer because that's all I was willing to do because I had my own family. I wasn't planning on working. So I was willing to do 4 weeks of summer camp. And by 9:02, I had a wait list for all 4 weeks. And I had 2 parents call and crying on the phone, making me feel really guilty. Like, why are you not doing more of this? And I had an occupational therapist reach out around that time and a physical therapist asking if they could replicate the program. It was, again, really unique. It's before a lot of this outdoor occupational therapy as well. I don't know if you've heard of that movement, but a lot of that was before that. And so I was like, all right, I realized that this had nothing to do with me, and that was something I was supposed to share. but I had no business experience. So I had to get business mentors that could think on a higher level. And they helped me to license TimberNook. And yeah, that was all volunteer too. They volunteered their time to help me. And
Wow.
yeah, and so TimberNook really represents timber is trees amongst the trees, and nook is like a nook or a cranny is a hidden place away from the adult world. Like the fears of the adult world are agendas that want to come in. It's really their space and their ability to play on a higher level. So basically after that point, I my goal was to train people in New England because that would have been the easy thing to do. But then I wrote an article called Why Kids Fidget and what we can do about it, and it went incredibly viral. And
Yeah.
that got picked up by the Washington Post, and then I did a TED Talk for Johnson and Johnson, and that's how the book came about. It was that message, how we're overly restricting children's ability to move and play. And so that's how TimberNook went to Australia, and it's now in Canada and throughout the UK. And before I even went to the state of Maine, which is next door to us, we're now in Maine, which is really good. But it just clearly this was a message that was more of a global issue. It wasn't just in my community. So in 2017, I'm almost done my story. Basically, you opened up a can of worms, right? So basically, in 2017, that's when schools started knocking on our door and asking if we could bring TimberNook into the schools. And so we started, now we also certify schools to do TimberNook as actually part of their day, part of their week. So they have like 2-hour time blocks where they have TimberNook if they have a wooded area to do TimberNook. And we have a school, a number of schools, but we have this one school, Laconia Christian Academy, that's been doing it for 5 years. And they increased it to twice a week TimberNook. So they get 4 hours of TimberNook time.
Wow.
And they've changed their recess from half an hour to an hour every day on top of TimberNook and have found significant changes in the children, that they're happier, healthier, and they're full of joy. So now we're researching that with the University of New Hampshire and how TimberNook is affecting school culture as well. So, okay, so that's where TimberNook getting us to this point, but that's how it was never my idea. It was just one thing leading to the next.
Isn't that's amazing? And that leads right into the next question, which is in explaining sort of your key findings in from your research in terms of how this importance of outdoor play is on child development, which you kind of wove in there. But I would love to hear even a
Sure.
little bit more about your research.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did do a research study with University of New Hampshire a number of years ago, and they compared what they were seeing at TimberNook out in the woods to typical like backyard play or play on a playground type play. And they found a significant change in the social play and the social interactions and attributed it to the environment and the way the environment is set up. You know, it's in the woods. So that is really therapeutic. But also like the type of materials presented and the way they're presented. We have a whole training on just, we call it staging. We stage the woods and we prepare the
Mm.
space for the kids. And then, so that was interesting. And then there's just a lot. So we're now researching how it's affecting school culture, but we are literally just starting that. So ask me next year, the year after, and I can tell you. We have the anecdotal evidence and, are seeing literally like the teachers are seeing the change, but it will be nice to actually have the data behind it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. So do you feel like our modern lifestyle is impacting children's physical and mental development? You were saying early on that just the wind and kids don't know how to play. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Which part do you want me to elaborate on?
I guess the children's inability to play, how parents and
Yeah.
how we as adults can step back, and then maybe the cherry on top with maybe some tips that you can give parents and
Oh,
teachers.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting because we have field trips come out a lot too, as well. And one of the first things I do is I go sit with the adults and I like spread them out because they're coming to TimberNook is like a whole different experience. Like they're like, where do I go? What do And so I basically explain it this way. Like what we learned over the years is that let's say children were building a fort. if I'm standing right next to them while they're building the fort, what happens is the children seek constant adult reassurance. Like, is this okay? Or can you please do this for me, tie this for me? Or they would tattle more often. However, if we would back up 10, 20 feet and get down low, so like finding basically reducing adult presence out there, we can still supervise them, and make sure that we see them and we can go in if we needed, which we have to do. There's a lot of training on when to go in, when not to go in. But essentially, because we reduce adult presence, the kids would start turning to each other to come up with, initiate their own play ideas and execute that play scheme. They would be more likely to solve their own problems, and there is a lot less tattling going on. Like even the teachers, I mean, in 3 hours, these kids were completely brand new to TimberNook. We're like, this is very different than what we see at recess. Like, I can't believe no kid is coming up to me right now. Like, so it is a significant change, but it does take a lot of training on the adults' part to really step back. And there's training on when do you go in? Like, because we do need to go in for safety. It's really about safety. Or there's 2 rules at TimberNook. If it's breaking one of the rules, then we can go in for that.
Wow. So there's someone just here, Sarah's just, what is the name of the school you mentioned that's using TimberNook?
Oh yeah. So if you go on our website under schools, you'll see a list of all the schools that do TimberNook. But Laconia Christian Academy is kind of like is almost like a model school because they're not far from us. And when we train, we always bring people to see that school and sit with the teachers and listen to them. They do have a video testimony. If you want me to send it to you after, I can send it to a group, but you can hear them talk about how they have no occupational therapists or special therapists that come out, and that TimberNook is really meeting a need there. But yeah, they start to talk about what is happening at their school because of TimberNook.
And there's another question that's come in from Anne. How can we register for the Staging in the Woods training? So is that in New Hampshire? Is that where you are? Or how does that?
Yeah, so that is part of that's like, it is part of TimberNook training. So we don't like train people on how to do like an aspect of TimberNook, but basically we train TimberNook providers. So people that want to do this and bring this licensed program, it's packaged as a program to your location. So there's providership. We have nonprofits that train and bring TimberNook as one of their offerings. They might do wilderness like training or wilderness programs. They might do outdoor occupational therapy, and then TimberNook is a totally separate thing. And so there's providership training where you can offer TimberNook summer camps, TimberNook forest programming, TimberNook field trips for people. And then the other one is certified school. Like we certify schools to do TimberNook. But yeah, we don't do components. Like we've always had that. People ask about that, but it's not TimberNook because you need all the components for it to be really effective.
So Christy's asking, what are the 2 rules at TimberNook?
Oh yeah. So one is that they have to be able to see an adult. So most sites don't have a boundary. Some have to because of where their location is, but we don't. And so we have, they have to be able to, like, the kids have to be able to pay attention. Like, am I going too far? We also are paying attention. Like, we just remind them if they go too far. And the other rule is being kind. And everything kind of falls under that. So there's 4 be kind rules, like be kind to each other. And we ask the kids, what does that look like? Being, like we don't allow them to call each other names. Like I don't allow swearing. I think it's super disrespectful, that kind of stuff. Being kind to nature, like, if it's alive, keep it alive. Within reason, like if they're picking like ferns to build a shelter, I would let that go. Like if they're catching frogs and they're being, mindful of how often they're catching, that to me is part of childhood. So you always have to balance that out. Being kind to materials. We do have materials out there that they can use, and we ask that they don't break them so that we can keep using them unless it happens as an accident. And then being kind to themselves. So like if they have to go to the restroom, if they are hungry, and that sort of thing, that they can grab a snack or ask to use the restroom.
It's brilliant. It's so simple.
Simple. Yes. Everything is much more simple, but yeah.
Simple. I absolutely love your book, Balanced and Barefoot, and I love the combination of your stories. I love the combination of your research, your background as an occupational therapist. I'm curious if you've noticed in any of your research, any differences in the way boys and girls respond to outdoor play. If
Yeah.
so, what are they?
Yeah, so I mean, it is very individualistic. Like there's going to be some girls that definitely play, more rough and tumble, but I would say that it's interesting for construction purposes. We'll see a lot of the boys will tend to build really more worried about the structure and how the forts are built. And a lot of times you see the girls decorating like into the design, but not to say like you don't see crossover and stuff. It just like if you're going to like pick up on some of those trends. What's really interesting though is that you'll tend to see girls and boys play together more at TimberNook than you would in other locations. Like we see a community come together. Like there's one time where, well, my daughters grew up playing this and like they they create hierarchies in societies and like one of the girls was the top leader and she had the feathered mask and she's like your top spy, top commander, and they were like really serious about they were going to go to war with this rock clan, and it was a mixture of boys and girls, and like I have a video that I do when I do keynotes and stuff and you can hear them going, wait, is Peter on our side? And then another one's like, wait, if he does anything strange, well, fire him. And so they're really, and they talk about traitors and who's in, like, on their team and people with switch. Like it's really neat to watch because it's really their opportunity to create boundaries within their play and to play with, risky situations. It's like thrilling to them. To work through conflict with other children without an adult doing it for them is so important today. So I have two teenage daughters, and a lot of the kids, that they are meeting in high school, like a lot of these kids have not had this experience. And so like my daughter recently was on 1,000 Hours Outside podcast talking about, she was the youngest guest, talking about what she's seeing in high school and, like dating and all this stuff that she's experiencing because there's a lot of social awkwardness or they're in this virtual reality compared to being in person. And like she's able to set boundaries like really well and just to be an example. She's very confident and very kind and it's just very interesting.
Because she's had that foundation. That's incredible. Are there any other questions from our group? I want to make sure I have many more, but wanted to also open it up. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about the balance between structured play and unstructured play?
Yeah, so when children lead the play, that's when it becomes true to me, true occupation. If it's run by an adult or directed by adult, it's not really play. And so I just think of it in a different way. I think of child-directed play is their opportunity to structure it themselves. So there's not almost no such thing as unstructured versus structured. It's structured, but it's literally structured by the children themselves. They come up with the rules, they create the boundaries, and they really hold each other to it, but they are practicing those skills without an adult doing it for them.
And do you feel like we as adults, like there's this magnet that we sort of feel like we have to be right next to them? I mean, and how do you like peel them away?
So I really just talk about like it is really important for adults to play with children. There's a time and place, but like I always say, TimberNook is a time for them to practice initiating their own play ideas because they're not getting an opportunity to do it anymore. And that's executive functioning is being able to initiate an idea and execute it independently. And so they really need to practice it and it's best through meaningful play. That is their occupation. So I think that we, well-intentioned, have overcomplicated everything and over-restricted children's ability to move and play, and it is affecting their development. Like they're having a hard time writing essays when they get older, or setting boundaries when they get older, or being resilient. We have kids that are physically struggling as well, like not knowing where their body is in space and becoming more and more unsafe because they're not spinning in circles or taking those physical risks. But we also want them to take those risks emotionally through play as well, and allow them to get mad or have an argument, and realizing that that's how they learn to regulate emotions and arousal level too. Like we'll have kids that are off the wall. You go out for recess for 20 minutes. And what happens is the first 20 minutes, your activity level goes up. And so now you let them in and they're off the wall. So it takes a good 45 minutes to an hour for that to regulate and for them to be ready to learn. So just giving them more time, basically time is huge. And space, the space to do it, and the opportunity, like the permission, those three things, and that can change everything for children, and what they can gain from it.
Yeah, and you also mentioned in your book about just the history of playgrounds and talking about space and how back in the day we would have swings and seesaws and all these sort of very risky. Can you speak a little bit about that? Just that, I found that to be absolutely fascinating, and how just our physical playgrounds today have changed over time and how that's impacting our children's development.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just to back up a little bit, because kids are so sedentary nowadays, and the most recent research is they're sitting in a chair in America about 9 hours a day. That's a real problem because kids are constantly in this upright position. And what needs to happen is they need to spin in circles and move in vigorous ways. And playgrounds are perfect for that. So like in the inner ear are little hair cells, and that when we move in vigorous ways, that moves the fluid back and forth. And that stimulates that and develops what we call the vestibular sense. And that balance sense is actually key to sensory integration. We call it the unifying sense. So if that's underdeveloped because kids are not moving enough, they can lead to all kinds of issues. And so you'll hear occupational therapists say sensory integration lays the foundation for learning, right? To pay attention in school and that sort of thing. So we do want them like rolling down the hills and spinning in circles. And the playground offered a unique opportunity to do that. So like longer slides and longer swings, all of that. The merry-go-round was super therapeutic. But what we've done in the name of safety is we've shortened slides and shortened swings and not allowed certain things to happen on equipment. But it's not really helping them. It's physics-wise, it's less sensory input. But the other issue with that is like, if we're not allowing kids to stand on swings or spin on swings, that sort of thing, we're keeping them in that upright position again. I remember actually working with a child and doing occupational therapy with them. This was before TimberNook, but it was when I started my programming. And I was doing outdoor OT on the side, and then I ended up abandoning that because like I really could not replicate what TimberNook was doing. But I was asking a kid, I said, I want you to stand on your swings. And she was like, oh, Miss Angie, that's so dangerous. And I was like, why? That's not dangerous. I remember growing up doing that like all the time. And then I'm like, I want you to spin when you go to school. And she was like, okay, so she went to school and then came back, and the next week she's like, they won't allow me to spin on my swing. And so I asked the recess monitor, and she said, yeah, they're not even allowed to go on their bellies anymore. We have to keep them in this upright position. And I found that really fascinating because as a therapist in our clinics, we'll have swings hanging from the ceiling, and we will position children in all different ways and spin them in different directions so that they really know where their body is when they navigate their environment. And that's basically what they do with astronauts. So astronauts, before they go in outer space, they get in this machine and they move them in all different directions so that when they go in an anti-gravity environment, they have really good spatial awareness so that they can navigate. And so that we use the same type of treatment protocol as therapists. And I thought it was really interesting that here we are as therapists trying to get them, to be in different positions swinging and how therapeutic that is. And in the school, they're saying sit upright, because you're going to become safer. But really, we're actually creating more and more unsafe children because we're not allowing them to move in those ways that neurologically they need to move to develop properly.
Yeah, amazing. So we got another question here. Two questions. Great. Quick question. What is the age range of the children? And the second question, and I remember in your book, you were talking about the infants. So we're even
Yeah.
That story. I love that story. And then Jody mentioned this is fascinating about the spinning and intentionality of therapists to use this method to help children understand where and how their bodies are moving. I think that's amazing. Yeah. So the age range of kids. So we're not just talking about preschooler or.
So 18 months up to, we have people like, I mean, I can do experiences for adults if I want to. Like Merrill Shoe Company came out and did teamwork building, and they did the giant ball run out in the woods with gutters and pulleys and climbing trees to make it go faster. But 18 months to age 14 would be the most typical. Drop-off programs don't start till age 4 because that's really the magic age where they're more independent. The toddlers through age 4 come with a parent, and we just get the adults to step back, and they have similar TimberNook experiences out there. And then what was the other? There was another 8. Oh, infants. Okay, so
In your book, you had a wonderful story.
yeah. So for infants, it's really important to remember that when this goes back to the vestibular sense. When a baby is born, like if they're full term, they should, like, how the visual sense takes time to develop, like they'll see in black and white at first. Well, the vestibular sense is fully functioning. They've done research on it, and they looked at the eye. So if you spin a child, and you can try this at home, if you spin 10 times to one direction, it's working on one inner ear. If you spin 10 times to the other direction, it's working on your other inner ear. And then you try closing your eyes and spin again. So, and have someone look at your eyes after. So after you do that, you should have what we call nystagmus. Your eyes should move back and forth vigorously. And if they do, that means you have a normal balance sense. However, if there's no eye movement at all, that means there's dysfunction with your balance sense. If your eyes don't stop moving after a minute, they should stop moving. That means you have a very sensitive balance sense. And so a lot of us are not moving enough. And, that's one reason why we can't tolerate rides. When we get older, maybe we could do the spinny rides or the roller coaster, and now we feel nauseous. It's because a lot of us aren't rolling down the hill or climbing trees or doing aerobics or moving enough. And so we really need children to move. I recommend at least 3 hours of outdoor play a day, right? For kids to get enough movement to maintain the vestibular sense and keep it really strong, and prevent falls, because now we're seeing kids fall out of chairs in school because they're not having good body awareness, and they're starting to run into each other more frequently. So that's all the vestibular sense. Well, babies, when they're born, if they're full term, because they're upside down and they're moving in the womb, that is fully functioning. However, if you take that baby and you sit them upright and put them in a container, and then you put them in another container and another container, the fluid in the inner ear can thicken, and they start to have like ear infections, start not knowing where their body is in space. And so they can lose, that can weaken. So they also need to be moved a lot. So making sure to move them in different directions, allowing them to get on the ground from an early age outside is really ideal. Because what happens is, that light touch, feeling, a lot of kids don't want to get dirty nowadays. So basically, the way to override that light touch sense that can feel really aversive for some children is deep pressure. And so it's very similar to like if you get a cut and they say put pressure on it, it helps neurologically override that sensation. The same is true with that light touch that can feel aversive. It's deep pressure. And so like you'll hear occupational therapists talk about brushing programs where they will brush a child. That is to integrate that light touch sense that can feel yucky. So what's nice about crawling is if they're outside and you put them on dirt, well, that can feel aversive, but because they're crawling, they're getting deep pressure as they crawl, and that's helping to integrate that light touch sense and create change to the senses. Sometimes we will bring, I told you earlier, that we'll bring a little box of sand and call that sensory. Well, I would argue that play on a beach is way more therapeutic than playing in a little box of sand. And one reason why is not only is it whole body sensory experience when you step outdoors, right? It's head to toe sandy, sand's everywhere. And you're navigating the uneven terrain. But also when you're digging in the dirt to build sandcastles, you're getting that light touch sense. But because you're getting that deep pressure, it's actually helping to integrate that light touch sense and create change to the senses. So you start to tolerate touching different substances. Whereas you go back to that little shallow box and it's not deep enough, right? So all you're doing is you're igniting the tactile sense, but you're not creating any change to the senses.
And then this is Christy's question. Do you give kids barefoot time at TimberNook?
So it's definitely allowed. Obviously, it depends on the weather. Like if it's really cold, like snow out,
Yeah.
they might experiment with it and then be like, oh, this is cold, and put their shoes back on. One thing we are mindful about, though, is that we would never suggest they go barefoot. It's more if they decide to go barefoot or they'll see other kids going barefoot. That's totally allowed. And the reason why is because often when kids have sensory issues, there's often anxiety tied to that. And so even just suggesting they go barefoot can rise anxiety level in children. And I have a good example of this where we had a little boy come one time and he knew we were going to the giant mud puddles and he had plastic welly boots on. And he said to me, he's like, I know we're going to the mud puddles. And he's like, I'm not taking these off. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So we walked down to the mud puddles, and what was interesting is a couple of the kids went right in and were catching frogs. And he was watching them, and he was visibly getting very animated about it, excited. So he started shaking, and he was like, oh. And so he went right in, and the mud went in his plastic welly boots, and he had socks on, which, that feels gross. So he came back out, and he's like, this is so gross. He's like, can I take this off? And I'm like, sure. So he took his welly boots off and his socks, and then he went in barefoot into the mud puddles. And it was really interesting. So we told the mom, we're like, yeah, he was in the mud puddles barefoot, catching frogs. And she goes, do you know he's been trying to go barefoot for 2 years in a clinic setting, unsuccessful. And here he is like in giant mud puddles. And he actually started going camping barefoot. So because it was also in a real environment, he was able to generalize that skill into other real environments. And now if I had gone to him and said, I think you should take your shoes off, what do you think would have happened?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So there's a control issue. So because that play was so motivating, it trumped everything. The other issue with what we do in clinics is we have these plastic balance beams. And so like here we'll kind of be like this preconceived, here we're walking on this right now. And that can rise anxiety level in a child with sensory issues. Whereas you're outside and there might be a log or it might be mud puddles and they might just watch and be okay with that. And they might just experiment an hour later. See, time is really important. But they were given the choice and in a real meaningful environment to do so.
That's beautiful. So I have another question from Bianca that goes back to the spinning. What are some common deficiencies, or lack of a better word, in development you were noticing amongst the children? But there was one before that. She wanted to know what type of spinning and swinging equipment do you provide in the woods? And then there's the second question, which is what are some of the common deficiencies in development you were noticing amongst the children as an OT?
Oh, yeah.
So the questions there.
Okay, so let's start with the second question. So one is, so that vestibular sense, I'll tell you about the couple things it does, right? One is it tells you where your body is in space. So it helps you get on and on playground equipment effectively, stay in your seat without falling out. And so one thing I would see is, or hear from teachers, is that kids are literally falling out of their chairs now and onto the ground. And so as occupational therapists, we'll often with the geriatric population, we want them to keep moving, to keep their vestibular sense really strong so that it prevents falling and hip fractures. And here we are, little children falling out of the chairs. And so that tells me there's a huge red flag that something in the environment is not right. Like we are asking them to sit too much. The other thing is that vestibular sense, it turns the reticular activating system on in the brain to pay attention. And so basically that's, when kids fidget a lot in a classroom, which is what's happening. I don't know if you heard one of my TED Talks, but it was the kids were fidgeting like crazy, like leaning back in their chairs at extreme angles. And that's what they're doing is they're trying to move their body back and forth, stimulate that vestibular sense to turn the brain on so they can pay attention. And so, sometimes as teachers we'll say, sit still or don't move, but clearly those kids need to move more often. And so attention was an issue. Falling out of chairs is an issue. Running into each other more frequently. And another big one is arousal level. Like kids are off the wall really having a hard time regulating that. And the other one is emotional regulation. So we will use swings for treatment for that. We will use swings to help with arousal level and emotional regulation. And if you think about it, I would argue if they got plenty of outdoor playtime, they wouldn't necessarily need special exercises to pay attention in a classroom, like Pilates and yoga and all that stuff that now we need to dim the lights and all that stuff. But
Right.
that's if they got enough outdoor playtime. But in TimberNook, we have just a rope swing is all we have out there. And because there's so much natural things out there, like in New Hampshire, we have giant boulders. It's called the Granite State. So there's huge boulders, there's trees they can climb where they're moving their head in all different directions. They can roll down the hill. They can spin in circles, so they can spin on their own axis. And then we have a rope swing, which they can also spin on, go upside down, and get creative with. And the reason why we don't have multiple swings, and sometimes our providers, we actually have to like draw them back in of not having too much out there, is when you have too much playground equipment, it creates playground play. And they literally stand in line for the playground equipment. And we want to inspire really creative, imaginative, all sorts of play. And a rope swing is something you might find in nature, like at a lake or just, it's really something, it's just simple. And it
Yeah.
allows for more agency and choice again for children.
All right. I would love to open it up. Sarah Du Bois has a couple questions. So Sarah, you
I
can
just
unmute
Thank you.
yourself.
I wasn't sure how to word them, but I'm interested in how much you explain to the kids why you're doing what you're doing or what you're
Mhm.
like the intentionality behind the choices that you make or the things that they can or can't engage in. I mean, I'm sure that changes with the age, but is there any like kind of metacognitive work that you do with kids around what they're experiencing and why? Or like, because I'm kind of wondering how you might help or coach parents that couldn't replicate TimberNook or afford an experience like TimberNook, and just how they could set things up or steps they could take or what they could do,
Yeah.
kind of just to even give some of the principles,
Yeah.
put something in place.
Mhm. Yeah, so we don't explain much to the children. We just say that's their time. And it's very simple. We go over the rules. There's the inspiration for the day and the environment staged, and then they take the lead.
Mm.
And there's a lot of training with adults to allow for that kind of environment. So it is hard to replicate TimberNook to that extent, but there are ways that adults can foster more independent play in their backyards and at their schools. Like for instance, that field trip today, they're like, we're definitely coming out for field trips because they recognize they're like, there's no way we can, offer this kind of experience. And that's why TimberNook is forming, is because it's becoming less likely to offer that kind of opportunity. And it's like neighborhood play on steroids. Like, I mean, there's so much more to it. And the training is ongoing and intense, and it takes you deeper and deeper. And, there's observational tools and communication tools, and there's a lot to TimberNook, but they are inspired to go back and be like, we're going to do field trips here for that. But we're also going to take back some simple components, like maybe we should have loose parts at recess time. And talk about the benefits of having loose parts. Loose parts are like, tires and planks and things that they could build forts with, materials that can be used for many affordances, and it allows for creative play. So that's also explained in the book. So, turn to Balanced and Barefoot, and it talks about ways to start getting them to be more independent, inviting kids over for the entire day, because the other children are part of the environment. Having mixed ages is really key, actually, versus everyone's 5, because the older kids will stand up for the younger kids, will inspire them. So I would turn to Bounce and Barefoot for parents and say, like, people have given it as a baby shower gift, like before the child is very old. You want to start young, get them in the dirt, get them crawling, because they're going to start integrating the senses from a really early age. So I would definitely do that. You can listen to, there are some podcasts on TimberNook like that we've recorded, and you can listen to them. TimberNook Tidbits if you search on our page. So, but I would gain as much knowledge as possible and start educating parents about the importance of outdoor play. This part's always effective as a healthcare professional. In my ethics classes, I was always told to do no harm. And we're at the point where actually harming children by overly restricting them. And so like it's really, really, really important to educate people on that.
Thank you.
All right, we have another question from Bianca. How does the licensing aspect of your program work, especially if you're already established nature program? Would the program have to be called TimberNook?
No. That's a good question. Well, yes, the actual program, when you're running TimberNook, it's called TimberNook. We actually have a good example of that. We had a forest school that recently decided to train and become a TimberNook provider. So they run some other programs that are not TimberNook, and they're called the Natural Discovery Forest School. And so, I think I'm going to do an article on their story because it's really inspiring, and they have a really powerful team of people. And they just recognize they're like, we just can't get to that level. And they wanted the training and the support and like an ongoing support and ongoing training. You know, all the experiences are designed for you. You get like a page on like everything's done for you. And you're joining a team. Like we're in 4 countries. So our providers are constantly sharing. We have TimberNook conferences. Ginny Urich is from 1,000 Hours Outside is our keynote this year. We had Peter Gray, Heather Shoemaker, and we have people speaking to our group. So I think just recognizing the license and the credibility and the research behind TimberNook and all the tools that come with it is really powerful. But their story, they are one to kind of watch. They're brand new, so they're just trying to launch right now. But they're like, this is what we needed. Like, because they're like, it can be lonely, like out there by yourself. And so that was another thing. But yes, you can absolutely have your own name. In fact, a lot of our schools and providers have their own business. This is a program.
Thank you. Another question from Christy is, can you give more examples besides the 3 little pigs? I absolutely want an example of other inspiration ideas that you can use.
Yeah. Well, so like the other example was like we've done Rube Goldberg's, we've done giant ball runs. Today they did castles and outlaw camps out there. What are we doing? Wild West next week. We have over 500 play experiences and growing. Like, so Star Wars themes like glow-in-the-dark adventures at night, where they're going glow forts at nighttime, glow warriors where they go against each other. It's just about anything that would be meaningful for a child. It is designed by us. We have to create every experience so that it is child-directed, and the staging is part of it. But all of that is given to our providers so they can sort through what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and based on where they're at as well.
This is just amazing. We just have a couple more minutes left. So another quick question from Julie. Is anyone running TimberNook in a family childcare program? It's a great question.
A really good question. We did have some interest from an Air Force base where they were doing family child, but I think it's challenging. It depends. Like you could absolutely do it, but like TimberNook does well with more children. So like, at least like for our toddlers and stuff, like having 15 children out there that's why it's really good with field trips or forest programming. Having at least 15 children actually makes TimberNook easier because they have choices of who they're going to play with. So if you have the ability to offer programming like that, then yeah, you could definitely do something like that.
Awesome. Are there any final questions for Angela? This has been absolutely amazing. You can either unmute yourself or write it in the comments.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing. So like I told you, not every provider is an OT, right? So we are credentialed with American Occupational Therapy Association. So if you do know of OTs, any training they do with us works towards their license. So it's like an added bonus for them. But we have a dental hygienist that runs TimberNook in the state of Maine, and she's been on a documentary. This goes to show you don't have to be an OT. So she's trained by us. She's been on a documentary for the state of Maine. She was recently in a magazine, and now she's going into public schools with her program, and the public schools are getting grant funding to pay for her TimberNook in the school, like during the week, and creating change. So goes to show that, yeah, you don't have to have that background.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think again, your book is a true testament to what is happening and what we can do as educators and parents to change it and to make these experiences for children healthier and just looking at their the occupational therapy side of it is absolutely fascinating. So I just want to thank you for your contributions and your time and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you so much. And you can just, if you have more questions for me, my email is Angie, ANGIE at TimberNook.com. So if anyone wants to reach out, I can probably point you in the right direction.
That would be great. I want to thank you so much for your time. And again, I look forward to reading more of your work and getting more involved and so on and so forth. So thank you everybody else for joining us. And we will continue this conversation and make that change.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a good night, everyone.
So if you like this podcast and you're getting something out of it, if it feels good and you walk away going, the day feels brighter and I want to go outside, then I want you to tell your fellow educators, parents, and friends about it. I want everyone to feel this awesome about getting outdoors and all the possibilities for playful learning with children when you get out there. So if you are talking about outdoor classrooms and you like talking about outdoor classrooms and teaching outdoors and all the different possibilities, subscribe to us and leave a review. We would love to have you. Go to our Outdoor Classrooms Facebook page, in our group, our Instagram pages, and tell us what your outdoor classroom challenges are. Want to dig deeper? Check out our Outdoor Classroom Circle membership community. It's like no other. Tell your fellow educators and let's start a little revolution about outdoor classrooms. When every child in every school has access to an outdoor classroom and learning gardens, then we will have more beauty in this world. Let's get creative and bring more joy into our teaching outdoors.